The forest did not care about Drew Callahan. That was what he liked about it. No one knocked on doors here, no one asked how he was holding up or gave him that look the one people gave a man who had lost everyone and chosen very deliberately to stop replacing them. Out here on Verada 9, the trees were tall and dark and the rain fell sideways half the year, and the wildlife did not ask questions. Drew had built a life around that silence. It suited him fine. He had been walking the eastern ridge for 3 hours, mapping root damage patterns in the soil for the Verada Conservation Board when he heard it. Not a growl, not a roar, something smaller than that, a sharp high sound that cut through the rain like a needle. Drew stopped walking. He stood still and listened the way his old field trainer had taught him, letting the forest settle around the sound so he could locate it properly. It came again to the left, down the slope near the old mining line. He almost kept walking, almost. The collapsed mining track had been abandoned for 11 years. Chunks of old relay equipment and iron support frames had been slowly sinking into the mud since before Drew even arrived on Verada 9. He had filed 3 reports recommending cleanup. Nobody had come. The debris field stretched for 40 m, and in the wet season it turned into something close to a trap. Uneven ground, hidden gaps, edges that looked solid until they were not. He found her in less than 2 minutes. She was young, he could tell by the size of her. A dragon, silver blue scales, darkened by rain, one wing folded and the other caught hard between 2 collapsed iron beams. She had clearly been pulling against it for some time. The scales near her shoulder was scraped, and the mud around her was churned in wide circles where she had been trying to twist free. When she saw him, she went very still. Her blue eyes tracked him the way all frightened animals track something new, waiting to see if it was a threat. Drew crouched down slowly. He set his field pack in the mud and held both hands open where she could see them. He did not speak for a moment. He just stayed low and kept his hands visible and let her look at him. Then he said quietly, "That looks like it hurts." She blinked. She did not move. He reached into his field pack and pulled out the short hydraulic pry tool he carried for dislodging soil sample cores. It was not built for this. He checked the angle of the beam, checked the second one, pinning it, and started working slowly, no sudden movements. The first beam shifted with a grinding sound and the dragon flinched hard, and Drew stopped and waited until she settled before he continued. It took 9 minutes. At one point the second beam slipped and Drew had to use his shoulder to hold it from dropping while he repositioned the tool, and he said nothing about that either, just held it and kept working. When the wing came free, she scrambled backward 3 steps and spread both wings slightly, checking them, testing movement. The injured one was stiff but unbroken. She folded it again and looked at Drew. He picked up his field pack and wiped the mud off the pry tool and put it away. "You should be able to fly by tomorrow," he said. "Stay out of the rain if you can." He turned and started walking back up the slope. He did not look back, not because he was not curious, he was, but because looking back at a frightened animal was how you made it feel cornered. He had learned that a long time ago. He walked the full 4 km home through the rain. By the time he reached his cabin, his boots were soaked through and the light was going gray and low through the trees. He stepped up onto the porch, pulled off his pack and turned to unlock the door. He stopped, sitting at the far end of his porch, dry. Under the overhang was the silver blue dragon. Her wing was folded tight. She was watching him with those calm blue eyes as if she had been there for years. Beside her sat another dragon Drew had not seen before, larger, deeper violet, scales almost black at the edges, and eyes that were a steady, unblinking gold. She was watching him too, and the quality of that watch was different. Focused, deliberate, the way someone looked at a thing they had already made a decision about. Drew stood in the rain for a moment. He looked at the two of them. He looked at his door. He thought about several things at once, none of which led to a clear answer. The rain picked up. He unlocked the door and pushed it open. He stepped inside and left the door open. Behind him, he crossed to the small kitchen, filled the kettle, and set it on the heat. He heard the quiet sound of claws on wooden boards, then the soft pressure change of the door swinging wider. He did not turn around. He poured water into a second vessel, larger, the one he used for soaking field equipment, and set it on the floor. He heard them settle. The fire popped. Outside, the rain came down in full force against the roof. Drew sat down in his chair and picked up the book he had left face down on the armrest 3 days ago and had not opened since. He opened it now. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. Just for one night, he told himself. He almost believed it. 3 days later, they were still there. Drew had stopped being surprised by this. Sometime on the second morning when he woke to find Lyra, the silver blue one, because he had started thinking of her by a name whether he intended to or not, sitting beside his kitchen shelf, rearranging his tins. She had sorted them by size, then apparently reconsidered and sorted them by color. She was in the process of a third system that Drew could not identify when he came in for his morning water and found her there perfectly calm, one claw hovering over a tin of dried lentils as if it were a chess piece. He looked at her, she looked at him. He made his water and went back to the main room. The violet one riser did not rearrange things, she fixed them. Drew discovered this when he reached for the window latch on the eastern wall, and it turned smoothly for the first time in 2 years. The stuck hinge on the storage cabinet fixed, the cracked leg on the wooden stool that Drew had been meaning to brace for 6 months, braced with a piece of flat stone wedged under it at exactly the right angle. He had not seen her do any of it. She was simply very quiet and apparently had strong opinions about things that were broken. On the afternoon of the third day, Drew heard boots on the porch and opened the door before the knock landed. Gavel's settlement patrol. Broad-shouldered, rain cape dripping, he had the particular expression of a man delivering news he did not enjoy. Callahan, Gavel said. He glanced past Drew into the cabin, then back. We've had a report, dragon sighting eastern ridge, 2 of them. I'm doing a sweep. Drew leaned against the doorframe. Riser and Lyra were behind him somewhere. He had not looked, but he knew they were there. I've been working the eastern ridge all week, Drew said. Haven't seen anything. Gavel looked at him steadily. Gavel was not a stupid man, which was the problem. Callahan. I'll keep my eyes open, Drew said. Another long look, then Gavel put his hat back on and walked off the porch. Without another word, Drew listened to the boots cross the mud and fade into the trees. Then he closed the door and turned around. Riser was sitting in the far corner of the room. Lyra was behind the kitchen shelf, just her eyes visible over the top of it, watching him with an expression Drew could not read except that it was very focused. He went back to his desk and picked up his field notes. Nobody said anything about it. That night the rain cleared for the first time in a week, and Drew sat on the porch with a mug and watched the dark. Between the trees, he heard claws on the boards, and then Riser was beside him, sitting tall, her golden eyes on the forest the same way his were. They sat like that for a while. Then, without looking at him, she spoke. Her voice was lower than he had expected, careful, like someone choosing each word with both hands. "You know what we are," she said, not a question. "I know what the colonial authority says." "You are," Drew said. "That's different." A pause. "Our clan held territory 40 km north." Riser said, 12 of us, we had held it for 6 generations. She stopped. She did not explain what had happened, and Drew did not ask. The past tense said, "Enough, Lyra and I have been moving. Since the 3rd month, we came south, because the forests here are deep." "Enough." Drew nodded. "You watched me with Lyra before I ever saw you," he said. "Yes." "For how long?" "Long enough," she said. There was something in it that was almost a dry answer. Almost. "You did not call the militia. You did not take images. You used a tool from your pack and held a beam with your shoulder and did not speak to Lyra as if she was something less than a person." Drew said nothing. "We have been watching humans for a long time," Raisa said. "Most of them look at us and see a problem to be solved." "I know," Drew said. "You look at us and see." She paused. I'm not sure yet what you see." Drew thought about that for a moment. He thought about the window latch that turned smoothly now. He thought about Lyra and the tins sorting and resorting them in the kitchen, as if the right arrangement was simply a matter of thinking it through. "I see 2 people who needed somewhere dry," he said. Raisa was quiet for a long time after that. Inside he could hear Lyra moving around. A soft, low sound, something between a hum and a rumble that he had started to understand was a contented noise. She made it when she was occupied. She had been making it most of the day. "You have no family," Raisa said. Finally, it was not unkind, just a fact, stated plainly. "No," Drew said. "Neither do we," she said. Neither of them said anything after that. The forest was dark and still, and the stars were coming out above the tree line one by one in the cold, clear air that follows rain. Drew finished his mug. He thought about going inside. He did not move. Raisa did not move either. They stayed on the porch in the quiet until it was late and the stars were very bright and the cold did not feel like it used to. The summons arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under his cabin door sometime before dawn. Drew read it twice over his morning water. It was printed on colonial authority paper, thick cream-colored, the kind they used when they wanted you to know the thing was official. His name was on the first line. "Director, sir." Lavos was on the last line. In between were 43 words that added up to one very clear message: "Come in or we come to you." He went in. Raisa and Lyra were quiet when he left. He did not explain and they did not ask. But Lyra watched him pull on his good jacket, the gray one with the sealed collar, and her head tilted slightly too the side the way it did when she was reading something. The Colonial Authority building sat at the center of Farhold settlement. It was the only two-story structure for 30 km. And it looked exactly like what it was. A building that wanted you to feel small when you stood in front of it. Director Voss was waiting in her office on the second floor. She was a thin woman with a precise way of sitting and a voice that sounded like it had never been raised in her life, which Drew had learned meant she never needed to raise it. Mr. Callahan, she said, sit down. He sat. You are a contracted conservationist, she said, which gives you a great deal of freedom to operate in the unincorporated forest zones. It does not give you the right to harbor unregistered Dragon-class entities within 50 km of a settlement. Drew looked at her. I found an injured animal. I helped it. 2 animals, Voss said, who are now living in your cabin, who have been there for 11 days, who are confirmed inside settlement range by 3 separate patrol reports. She folded her hands on the desk. I'm going to be direct with you because I think direct is faster with you. There are 2 options. Option 1, you register Raisa and Lyra as managed wildlife under Colonial Authority care. That means they are assessed, cataloged, and housed in the preservation facility outside Farhold. A cage, Drew said. A facility, Voss said. Option 2. You remove them from the settlement zone within 72 hours, beyond the boundary line. They are outside my jurisdiction, and this matter is closed. Drew sat with both options for a moment. Those are the only 2, he said. Those are the only 2, she said. He stood up, put his hat on, and said, Thank you for your time, Director. He walked out of the building and into the gray morning air and stood on the front steps for a moment. Then he walked home. He had his cabin radio on while he was gone. He usually kept it open on the conservation channel. He had not thought about it when he left. He thought about it now. When he pushed open the cabin door, Lyra was sitting exactly where she had been when he left, but she was not making her contented sound anymore. She was very still. Raisa was standing at the window, looking out, her back to the room. Kind of still that is not calm, the kind that is holding itself together. They had heard everything. Drew crossed to the kitchen. He started pulling things down from the shelf. The good pot, the grain tin, the dried vegetables. Lyra had reorganized 3 times. He started making dinner, not a small dinner, a proper one, the kind that took time and required stirring. He heard Raisa turn from the window. Drew, she said. Give it 20 minutes for the grain, he said. You should not have. Raisa, he kept his back to her, kept stirring. I know what I should and shouldn't do. I've been making those calls for 30 years. This one wasn't hard. He added a pinch of salt. Sit down. A long pause. Then the quiet sound of her settling onto the floor behind him. Lyra made a very small sound, not her contented sound, something quieter. She moved closer to the warmth of the stove. They ate together. Drew had made enough for 3 without thinking about it, which he realized only when he was serving it out. He sat on his stool. Raisa sat across from him. Lyra sat between them and ate very neatly and did not say anything for a while. Then she looked up at Drew and said, You are not afraid of her? Of Voss, he considered it. No. Why not? He thought about how to answer that. Simply because she's following rules that somebody else made. She doesn't personally want to hurt you, she just hasn't been given a reason to think of another option yet. Raisa looked at him steadily. And you believe a reason will come? I think reasons usually do, Drew said. If you give them time. Lyra was quiet for a moment, then she looked down at her food and Drew could see something working through her expression, not quite belief, not yet, but something that wanted to be. Outside, the wind was picking up. The trees pushed against each other in the dark, and somewhere far out in the forest, something large moved between them. Drew washed the pot. Raisa fixed the cracked hinge on the cabinet that she had apparently noticed and not yet gotten to. Lyra reorganized his second shelf and then halfway through stopped and simply left it where it was. They stayed like that, quiet and close, inside four walls that felt a little less like just a cabin. And the 72 hours began. The storm came in on the second day of the 72 hours, and it came in wrong. Drew had seen bad weather on Verona 9. He had lived through the long rain seasons and the electrical storms that lit the ridges up purple for hours. This was different. The pressure dropped so fast that his ears popped inside the cabin. The wind hit the tree line like a wall, and the trees bent, and some of them did not come back up. Raisa was at the window before Drew was fully awake. Lyra was already at the door. The emergency frequency broke open on the radio at 5:15 in the morning. Drew was pulling on his boots when the voice came through, gavel calm as always, but stripped down to facts, the way people got when facts were all they had left. 6 workers, water reclamation station. On the south side of the settlement. East tunnel collapse, structural failure. From storm load, they were alive. The emergency beacon was pinging, but the tunnel was too narrow for extraction. Teams and their equipment, heavy machinery, could not get close without risking a second collapse. Manual digging would take 6 hours. The workers had maybe 3, given the water rising in the lower chamber. Drew stood up straight. He turned around. Raisa and Lyra were already looking at him, not with fear, not with reluctance. They were looking at him the way people look at someone when they already know what is going to be asked and have already decided. He opened his mouth. Raisa said, "How far?" 4 km, Drew said. "South, the tunnels are old iron brace construction, wide enough for your wingspan folded. You would need to move debris by hand, claw, without pushing weight onto the floor. Above the lower chamber." Lyra looked at Raisa. Raisa looked at Drew. "We go now," Raisa said. They went. Drew ran the whole 4 km and he was breathing hard when they reached the site. The reclamation station was chaos. Patrol officers, 2 emergency vehicles, a cluster of settlement residents who had come out in the storm because that is what people do. Gavel was standing at the tunnel entrance with a torch and the expression of a man who had run out of answers. He saw Drew. He opened his mouth. Then he saw Raisa and Lyra behind Drew, and he closed it again. "They can do it," Drew said. He did not stop walking. "Get your people back from the entrance. Give them room." Gavel looked at the 2 dragons. He looked at the tunnel. He looked at the water pooling at the entrance from the runoff. He made a decision the way good officers make decisions, fast and then fully. "Everyone back," he said. "Now back." Brysa folded her wings and went in. First, she was too large for the tunnel. Standing upright, and she moved through it low and fast, her claws reading the floor as she went. Lyra went in right behind her. Drew crouched at the entrance and listened. Deep impact, stone moving along. Grinding sound, then a pause, then it. Again, Brysa and Lyra were working in rotation. Drew could tell by the rhythm. One moving debris while the other held position, taking turns so neither put sustained pressure on a single point of the structure. Director Voss arrived 18 minutes in. Drew saw her step out of a patrol vehicle in her long coat and stand at the edge of the cleared zone. She looked at the tunnel entrance. She looked at Gavel. She did not say anything. At 2 hours and 41 minutes, the first worker came out. A young woman, dust-covered, helped by Lyra, who backed out of the tunnel. Guiding her with one careful claw, she sat down in the mud in the rain and just breathed. The second came out 6 minutes later, then 2 more together, then they last 2 both able to walk, one of them holding the other's arm. 6 in, 6 out. Brysa emerged last. She had a long scrape along her left shoulder where she had braced against a falling support to keep it from dropping. She stood up to full height outside the tunnel entrance and shook stone dust from her wings and looked around at the gathered crowd of settlement people with her steady gold eyes. Nobody moved for a moment. Then one of the rescued workers, the young woman who had come out first, looked up from where she was sitting in the mud and said simply, "Thank you." Lyra looked at her. Something shifted in Lyra's expression, something that had been held carefully for a long time and was now quietly releasing. "You are all right," Lyra said. "Yes," the woman said. "Good," said Lyra, and she sat down in the mud beside her in the rain without any ceremony. Drew looked over at Director Voss. She was still standing at the edge of the cleared zone. Her coat was wet. Her face was doing something complicated that she was not entirely managing to control. She was looking at Lyra sitting in the mud next to the rescued worker, and she was very still. She did not look at Drew. She did not need to. Gavel appeared at Drew's shoulder. He stood there for a moment without speaking, which was how Gavel showed most of his feelings. Then he said, "I'll file the incident report." "Okay," Drew said. "It'll say Dragon Class Assistance. Search and rescue, full cooperation with Settlement Authority." He paused. "Make sure that's very clear." Drew nodded. They stood in the rain together and watched the settlement's medics move through the crowd, and the storm began slowly to ease. The removal order expired without being replaced. No announcement, no meeting, no official letter on thick cream paper slipped under anyone's door. One morning, the 72 hours simply ended and nothing happened. And then a week passed and nothing happened, and then another week, and by the end of the second one, Drew stopped thinking about it the way you stop thinking about a sound that turns out not to be anything. Voss never explained. He did not expect her to. Farhold was a small settlement, and small settlements could not keep secrets the way large cities could, which meant that by the end of the first week after the rescue, most people in it knew roughly what had happened in the tunnels. Word moved the way it always moved. Through the market, through the fuel station, through the 2 tables at the back of the meal hall where people sat and talked longer than they needed to. The change was not sudden, and it was not dramatic. It was the kind of change that happened at the edges of things. Conservationist colleague of Drew's, named Petra, started asking Brysa Questions about the northern forest. Terrain carefully at first, then less carefully when she realized Brysa answered everything exactly and in full. A boy of about 9 who lived near the market started leaving out pieces of dried fruit on the low wall where Lyra sometimes sat in the afternoon sun. Lyra always ate them with great seriousness, and the boy always watched from a careful distance, and neither of them made a thing of it. Gavel nodded to Brysa once when she passed him near the patrol post. She nodded back. That was all, but it was the kind of all that meant something. Drew noticed these things and said nothing about them because that was how he treated things he cared about. He did not say much about them, he just paid attention. He started work on the cabin in the 5th week. He did not announce it. He ordered the timber and the fasteners from the supply depot on a Tuesday, and on Wednesday morning he was out the back of the cabin with a measuring string and a level. Before the sun was fully up, Brysa appeared at the back door with a mug of water for him. She had started doing this, making the water in the mornings, and Drew had stopped remarking on it. And she looked at the string and the level and the posts he had already set in the ground. She said nothing for a while. Then she said, "You are adding a room." "2," Drew said. He moved the string and checked the angle. Another pause. "You are adding them for us," she said. Drew kept his eyes on the level. "I'm adding them because this cabin has always been too small, and I've been putting it off for years." Brysa was quiet. "Hand me that stake," he said. She handed it over. "It is the same thing," she said. Drew looked up at her. Her gold eyes were steady. There was something in her expression he had not seen there before. Not warmth exactly, because Brysa was always warm beneath the surface, in the way that deep things are warm. Something more open than usual, something that was letting him see it. "Yes," he said, "it is." He went back to work. She stayed and helped him all morning, without being asked, which was also her way of saying something she did not say out loud. Lyra found out about the rooms at midday. When she came back from the market, she stood and looked at the new frame rising at the back of the cabin, rough-hewn uprights and the beginning of a roof. And she was very still for a moment, in a way she almost never was. Then she turned to Drew and said, "Can mine face east?" "Already planned," he said. She made her contented sound for the rest of the afternoon. That evening, while Drew was reading and Lyra was reorganizing his 3rd shelf, Brysa sat beside him and was quiet for a long time, in the way that meant she was arranging words. He waited. "In our tradition," she said finally, "there is a word. It has no direct meaning in your language." She paused. "The closest version is this: when someone shelters you through your grief and does not ask what you will give them in return, when they do this not because you are useful but because you need it. Shelter, they become clan, not chosen ally, not bonded partner. Clan." Drew kept his eyes on his book. "There is a word for the one who did the sheltering," Brysa said. "We use it for no one lightly." Drew looked up. "What is the word?" he said. She told him. It was 2 syllables, low and resonant, and a little rough at the front, softening at the end. He repeated it. She looked at him with those gold eyes for a long moment. "Correctly," she said quietly. From the shelf, Lyra had stopped moving. She was watching them both with her blue eyes very bright and her expression completely open. Drew looked at his book. He looked at the fire. He looked at the unfinished frame out the back window, the new bones of a bigger cabin standing in the dark. He set the book down on the armrest. "Is there a word," he said, "for what you two are to me?" Lyra laughed, a low warm sound that filled the whole room. Brysa looked at him steadily. "Yes," she said, "the same one." Drew nodded once. Outside, the forest breathed in the dark, deep and old and unbothered by any of it. Inside the cabin, it was warm. 6 months after a rainy evening, and an open door, a woman arrived on veranda 9 with a recorder and a list of careful questions. Her name was Dr. Ilna Mack. She worked for the Interspecies Coalition, a body that existed to observe and document the rare moments when species from different worlds managed to live alongside each other in ways that did not end in policy, documents, or property disputes. She had been doing this work for 14 years across 9 different colony worlds, and she had seen many things, but she had never seen anything that matched the report she had read 3 times on the transit in. She asked Gavel first because she always started with whoever filed official documentation. He described what he had seen in the tunnels plainly. He was not a man who added to things. She asked Petra, the conservationist, who described Rice's knowledge of the northern terrain, and said, "She explains things the way someone does when they have lived with a place for generations. I've started bringing my field data to her before I write any recommendations." She asked the boy near the market, whose mother translated the interview, and who said only, "She's nice. She always eats the fruit even when it's not good fruit." Then she walked 4 km east through the forest to a cabin that was bigger than it used to be, and she sat on the porch and asked Drew her list of questions. He answered all of them. He did not rush. He did not try to make it sound like more than it was. She asked, "When did you decide this was going to work?" He said, "I didn't." She waited. "I didn't sit down and plan it," he said. "I fixed a wing and walked home. They were at the door. I opened it." He shrugged slightly. "I don't know what I thought would happen. I think I just stopped thinking about it in terms of working or not working." "Why?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. "Because they were cold," he said, "and I had a fire." She looked at him for a moment. "That's the whole reason," she said. "That was the first reason," he said. "The rest came after." She asked to speak with Rice and Lyra. Separately, they agreed. Lyra went first because she wanted to, sitting across from the recorder with great calm and her wings folded and her blue eyes interested in everything about the interview setup. She spoke about Drew the way someone speaks about a thing they have been thinking about for a while and are glad to finally say. "He never once looked at us and thought about what we could do for him," she said. "Most beings, when they encounter something new, their first question is, 'What does this mean for me?' He never asked that question, not once, not even the night of the storm when he could have used us as a reason. Look what these dragons did. Now you have to keep them." He did not do that. He just asked us if we wanted to go, and that is the whole thing. That is everything about him in one moment. Rice sat down with Dr. Mack in the evening after dinner on the porch. Drew was inside. Lyra was reorganizing something. The sound of very careful movement came through the open window behind them at regular intervals. Rice looked out at the forest and talked. For almost an hour. She talked about the clan, she talked about the months of moving through forest zones that were shrinking, she talked about watching Drew with Lyra in the debris field, the way he went still when the beam slipped, held it with his shoulder and did not make a sound about it. She talked about the first night in the cabin and the vessel of water he set on the floor without turning around. Near the end, Dr. Mack asked, "What is it about humans that allowed this? What quality made this possible?" Rice considered the question the way she considered everything fully and from multiple angles, and then honestly. "The stubbornness about kindness," she said finally. "Most species, when kindness becomes costly, revise it downward. They find a reason to stop. Humans have this particular quality. They become more stubborn about it when it gets harder, as if the difficulty of the thing is the point." She paused. "Drew is not unusual. He's simply very clearly himself. He showed us what humans look like when they are being fully what they are." Dr. Mack wrote her report on the long transit back. She revised it twice. She was a precise writer, and she wanted the words to be right. It was titled First Recorded Voluntary Kin Bond Between Human and Dragon Class Species Verada 9. It circulated through 17 star systems. It was cited in 11 policy reviews. It was translated into 8 languages, including 2 that did not previously have a word for what Drew had done, and so coined one. None of this meant very much to the 3 people it was about. On the evening the report was first circulated, they were on the porch. Drew was reading. Lyra had carried out small flat stone she was turning over in her claws, studying something about its grain. Rice was watching the forest with her gold eyes, which was her evening practice and had been for 6 months. Nobody was speaking. Nobody needed to. The trees were dark and the stars were out, and somewhere in the deep forest something was moving between the old, tall trunks, and the cabin behind them was warm and lit, and all 3 of them were exactly where they meant to be. That was the whole of it. That was enough.